Okay, let's continue with section 2.3. So 2.3 is mainly done with the calculator. So make sure that you have your calculator. Hopefully you have attained that by now in the course. So we're going to evaluate each of the trigonometric expressions, evaluate the trigonometric expression approximately. So we're going to plug tangent of 63 degrees and 43 minutes into the calculator. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want the tangent. So the tangent key is right there in red. Okay, the tangent of 68. Now I want to get the degrees. Now how do I get degrees? Well, I have to go to the angle key, which is the second apps key. So it's second, and then apps, and there's the degrees. Below it is the minutes. Okay, and then if you want seconds, they don't have seconds here. The seconds is actually above the plus sign. So if you wanted seconds, it's the alpha plus. You would have to hit alpha and then plus. I'll show you that here. Let's if I wanted seconds, you know, some sort of seconds, I would hit alpha and then the plus key, and that gives me seconds. Now why it's there, I have no idea. But if you do need seconds, I don't think any of the problems that we have here require seconds, but if you did need seconds, that's where you find it. It's the alpha plus key, which is really interesting. But anyway, let's go back to tangent, and then the second angle key, we have, I want to put in my angle first. That's 68 degrees. 68 degrees angle, 1 is degrees. And then we have 43 minutes, 43 minutes. So second angle, we'll go arrow down to 2 here and hit enter, and that's 43 minutes. Okay, so as I work through these, go ahead and feel free to pause the video and, you know, find the keys on the calculator. You know, you can slow down the video and just go frame by frame, and then you know, because you know I'm going to do this pretty fast because I know exactly where the keys are. I'm going to do the close parenthesis, and then I'll hit enter, and it comes out to about 2.567. So I'm going to go here and say this was about approximately 2.567 was the answer. Okay, what about the next one here? Cosecant. Well, cosecant is 1 over the sine. Okay, so I want to find the sine, and then I want to do 1 over that. Okay, the sine, 1 over the sine of what? Of 35.8471. Okay, so let's go to the calculator, and we're going to do 1 over the sine of 35.8471. Close parenthesis. You don't need a close parenthesis, but I like to. And then I get 1.707 or 1.708. So I'll write that down. This is approximately 1.708 for the cosecant of that. Secant is 1 over cosine. So this is 1 over cosine of 287 degrees. Okay, so let's see what that becomes. So 1 over 287 degrees. So 1 over the cosine of negative, I think it was, right? Negative 287. And we get 3.420, round to the thousandths place. So this was a negative, by the way. This is 3.420. Okay, calculators are used to approximate the angle measures given the trigonometric function value. We can use the inverse sine. Now, don't get this confused inverse sine with cosecant, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we can use inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. Okay, and inverse tangent. Let's find the angle. When we do the inverse, we're finding the angle. So in the interval 0 to 90 that satisfies each condition here. So just in the first quadrant, the answer for just the first quadrant, the cosine of theta, we want to say what angle produces a cosine that is 0.92118541. Okay, what angle produces that? So the theta, we call this inverse cosine, the arc cosine. So this is called inverse cosine or arc cosine. Okay, and that is gonna, the inverse cosine or the arc cosine, the inverse functions, those produce angle measures. Okay, so inverse cosine of 0.92118451. I want to plug this into the calculator. There's a special inverse cosine. And again, this isn't the same as secant, okay? Don't get that confused, okay? So this is a different function, an entirely different function, inverse cosine, but it will give me an angle measure in degrees. So if I go to the calculator and I go inverse cosine, which is the second, and then I hit the cosine key. So it's the blue ones above the sine, cosine, and tangent here. So second inverse cosine, that gives me a cosine to the -1 power, which is inverse cosine. Again, it's not the same as secant, which I could use the x to the -1 key. So don't get these confused. It's really easy to get the inverse cosine, and then if I take cosine to the -1 power, that's it. They're just, it's so easy to get confused. And again, I'll talk about that in just a minute to say, hey, try not to confuse those. But the right key to get the angle is the arc cosine, which is second cosine there. So second and then cosine. Maybe I'll do that one more time. The second and then the cosine key. This is going to give me an angle. The angle whose cosine is, okay, so let me just plug in one that we already know. The angle whose cosine is 1/2. The angle whose cosine is 1/2. And that should come out with 60 degrees. So let's see if that works. Oh, yeah, it does work. Okay. The angle whose cosine is 1/2 is 60 degrees. Okay, so that's cool. Okay, so now let's do the one that is the example we're working on. The angle whose cosine is 0.92118541 is 22.9. Okay, 22.9. So that's the answer for that one. It is 22.9 degrees. So theta is approximately 22.9 degrees. What about cotangent? Now this one's a little tricky because we don't have an arc cotangent key. We don't have an arc, we have an arc tangent key. So we have to change the cotangent into a tangent. So how do we change cotangent and tangent? Well, they're reciprocals of each other. They're just flipped upside down. Okay, so if I want to change this cotangent into a tangent, then the cotangent of theta is 1 over the tangent of theta, which is equal to 1.446471. I think I missed a 6 there. 66474, I should say. Okay, and then how would I do the reciprocal? Well, I could put this over 1, and now I could just flip these guys upside down, both of them. And so the tangent of theta divided by 1 is equal to 1 over 1.4466474. Okay, so I do the reciprocal of that. And so this is the tangent of theta is equal to 1 over 1.4466474. And now I can find the arc tangent of this, or the inverse tangent. I can find the angle. The angle whose tangent is this fraction over here. The angle whose tangent is 1 over 1.4466474. Okay, and that's going to be approximately, well, whatever we get in here, the arc tangent of 1 divided by 1.4466474. Okay, is 34.654 degrees. So 34.654 degrees is 34.654 degrees. Okay. Be careful when evaluating the functions. The inverse sine is not the same as 1 over the sine. Again, especially on the calculator. Okay. This gives me an angle theta. This gives me a cosecant of theta. Okay, they are not the same. This is an angle. This is the angle whose sine is, x, and this is 1 over the sine of x being an angle. Okay, so they're not the same thing. So the inverse sine, okay, on the calculator is not the same as the sine. I should do as the sine of theta to the -1 power. These are not the same. Okay, so if I plug in sine of theta, okay, and then I do the x to the -1 key, if I do the sine key and then I do the x to the -1 key, I'll just leave that there. It's fine. Okay, that's not the same as the inverse sine key. The inverse sine key gives me the angle. The sine to the sine key and then the x to the -1 key, that gives me cosecant of theta, and those two are not the same. They're not the same. Let's look at the calculator. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, when I did the, let's do the inverse sine of 1/2. So the inverse sine of 1/2. Okay, this tells me that I want the angle whose sine is 1/2, and that's 30 degrees. Boom. Enter. That gives me a 30-degree angle. However, if I took the sine of 1/2, okay, and then I did the x to the -1 key, that's going to give me completely different angle, or a completely different value. Okay, this is not an angle. Okay, and that actually gives me different than if I did this too. So if I do this in parentheses, okay, and I do the sine of 1/2, okay, and then do a parentheses and then do that to the, now this is cosecant. This is the cosecant of 1/2. Okay, so the cosecant of 1/2, okay, is 114.59. Okay, so I guess it does work. It's fine. Okay, so one is the arc sine, which gives you an angle, and the other is the cosecant of a 1/2 angle. Okay, angle of 1/2. So yeah, so don't get those confused. Okay, again, extremely easy to confuse those, but the inverse sine is an angle. So the inverse sine of theta, or sorry, of x is equal to theta. Okay, this gives me an angle. Okay, the sine x to the -1 equals the cosecant of theta. Okay, actually it's the cosecant of x. Okay, and this just gives me a trig function. Okay, so one gives me an angle and one gives me a trig function cosecant. So don't make that mistake, okay? So real easy to do on the calculator. Okay, and that'll do it for 2.3. I'll see you in the next section.